Imagine lying in bed at 2 a.m., exhausted, staring at the ceiling, knowing your body wants sleep, but your brain simply refuses to shut down. And the older you get, the more it feels like your mind has a mind of its own, racing, replaying memories, worrying about tomorrow, refusing to slow down, no matter how tired you feel. But what if I told you that you can literally force your brain to fall asleep, even after? Because here's something nobody explains clearly. Your brain doesn't fall asleep because you're tired. It falls asleep because certain signals tell it there's nothing left to stay awake for. And after, not by taking more pills, not by fighting your thoughts, but by using simple neurological switches that your brain still responds to, no matter your age. These aren't tricks. They're biological mechanisms your brain is already wired with. You just haven't been shown how to activate them. There, those signals get weaker, melatonin drops, cortisol stays higher at night, the brain becomes more alert, more guarded, more sensitive to noise and light. That's why older adults take longer to fall asleep and wake up more often. But the beautiful part is this: your brain is not broken. It still listens to the right commands. You just have to give them in a language your brain understands. The first switch is your breath. Not deep breathing, not meditation, something much simpler. When you breathe out longer than you breathe in, your brain immediately activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for calming the body. It's automatic. You can't stop it from happening. Try breathing in for 3 seconds and then exhaling for 6. Do it 4 or 5 times. This sends a direct signal to your brainstem that you are safe. And within 30-60 seconds, your brain slows the electrical activity that keeps you awake. This technique works at any age. 0, even 90, because it taps into a survival system older than your conscious mind. The next switch is something incredibly simple: light exposure in the morning. Most older adults spend too much time indoors, and the brain stops recognizing the difference between day and night. When you go outside for 2 minutes of real sunlight early in the day, your brain resets its internal clock. By the evening, the melatonin signal becomes stronger, more precise, and easier to respond to. This alone can change your entire sleep cycle in less than a week. The second switch is temperature. Most people over a struggle to sleep because their brain can't cool down at night, but the brain will always fall asleep once it hits a certain temperature. And you can force that temperature drop by warming your hands and feet, even just slightly. Put on warm socks. Rinse your hands under warm water. Use a heating pad on your feet. When the extremities warm, the brain releases heat through the body, dropping your core temperature, which is the exact biological trigger that initiates sleep. You're not hoping your brain cools down, you're controlling it. Another powerful switch is what neuroscientists call pattern interruption. The brain stays awake because it keeps thinking the same thoughts over and over again. Worry, planning, remembering, it loops. But the moment you disrupt the loop, even for a few seconds, the brain becomes vulnerable to sleep again. One easy method is the 5-4-3 grounding trick. Look at 5 objects, touch 4 textures, listen to 3 sounds. You don't even need to finish the whole sequence. Your brain becomes bored, slows down, and naturally drifts towards sleep mode. This works because the brain can't stay anxious while multitasking in simple sensory awareness. And finally, one of the strongest sleep-forcing tools is something called cognitive offloading. If your brain is awake because it's trying to remember things, tasks, worries, appointments, write them down, physically writing tells the brain, you no longer need to keep this active. It shuts down the memory loop and frees mental space for sleep. Older adults often don't realize their brain is fighting sleep because it's afraid to forget something important. A pen and paper can silence that fear instantly. So yes, you can force your brain to fall asleep. Even after you're not helpless, your brain still has built-in switches for rest, calm, and recovery. You just need to activate them intentionally. If you want more videos that help you regain control of your mind, your energy, and your health, make sure you subscribe, because your best nights of sleep can still be ahead of you starting tonight. Most people believe the reason they can't fall asleep after 0 is simply because they're getting older, or because their body doesn't get tired the way it used to. But the truth is much more interesting and much more hopeful. Your brain does not fall asleep because you feel tired. Feeling tired and actually falling asleep are 2 completely different systems. You can be exhausted, drained, and barely able to keep your eyes open and still lie awake for hours. That's because sleep is controlled by biological signals, not by how sleepy you feel. And as you age, especially after, those biological signals become weaker, slower, and sometimes confused. But the system itself is not broken. The wiring still works. The switches still exist. You simply need to activate them in the way your brain responds to naturally. Both of these signals weaken. The body doesn't build as much sleep pressure, and the circadian rhythm becomes less precise. That means the "I'm tired" signal and the "fall asleep now" signal don't line up anymore. That mismatch is why older adults often feel exhausted during the day but wide awake at night. It's not because they slept too much, it's because their brain didn't receive the internal cues that allow sleep to begin. Your brain has two main forces that control sleep. One is sleep pressure, the accumulation of chemicals that make you want to sleep. The other is the circadian rhythm, the internal clock that decides when you can sleep. Another reason sleep becomes difficult is that the brain becomes more alert at night, not less. This is something rarely talked about. As people age, their stress hormone patterns shift. Cortisol, which should be low at night, often stays elevated. A lifetime of responsibilities, worries, and habits trains the brain to stay on guard, especially when the world gets quiet. The mind loops through memories, anxieties, or random thoughts. Many older adults describe this as "my brain won't shut off." But what's really happening is that the systems that once quieted the mind effortlessly now need intentional activation. This is why you can't relax yourself to sleep by force. Telling your brain to stop thinking doesn't work because thinking is not the problem. Lack of proper sleep signals is the real issue. Your brain is waiting for cues, specific neurological patterns that say, "We are safe, we are calm, nothing is urgent, it's time to shut down." Before, those cues used to happen automatically. After, you must trigger them manually. And the good news is that these triggers still work beautifully. Your brain is far older than you are, millions of years older. It's wired to respond to breathing rhythms, body temperature shifts, light patterns, and sensory changes. These built-in mechanisms for sleep still function even in people well into their 80s and 90s. The challenge is that modern habits, stress, artificial light, and age-related hormone changes drown out the signals. But when you activate them intentionally, your brain listens immediately because these signals bypass conscious thought and speak directly to your nervous system. Once you understand that sleep depends on the right commands rather than the feeling of tiredness, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself, stop thinking your age has destroyed your ability to sleep, and start working with your biology instead of fighting it. And that is when sleep stops being a struggle and becomes something your brain remembers how to do naturally. Again,